being all in is like infectious with the rest of the employees, with the customers.
Why would you go join this no revenue company?
I am going to put my entire heart into this. I need this to be in the world. I know it's not rational. I'm just going to make it happen.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. I have Nick Mehta with me today. Nick turned customer success from back office checkbox into a strategic board level imperative. Gainsight essentially created this category. Nick ended up leading Gainsight from early stage challenger to industry pioneer, scaled it to thousands of enterprise customers, helping to deliver, of course, billions in customer value. And 4 months ago, Nick left Gainsight in a full-time capacity. Nick is, of course, figuring out what's next right now. Nick, how do you define entrepreneurial excellence?
I think that there's some element where, it's always helpful to have a little perspective and know that there's lots of kinds of entrepreneurs in the world. And I think we have some kind of version of definition, which is you and I both live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I love it here. And I'm also recognizing that there's entrepreneurs all over the world, right? Somebody that starts like a restaurant or a fruit stand or starts a, small business or a huge company or obviously somebody in software. And so I think when I think about it, there's maybe a couple of things that feel like they're common because there's such a broad range. One is, I think people that are like misguided enough to actually try because it's never the risk adjusted best answer. And then number two, I think is somebody who actually just has some passion for something being in the world. And that, again, that could be a restaurant on your corner or it could be NVIDIA, right? But like, it's something that where you're like, I need this to be in the world. I know it's not rational. I'm just going to make it happen. And that's what's so inspiring about being here is you and I get to meet a lot of people like that, right? Where they just are going after it thick or thin. It's awesome.
It is awesome. That's why I see nonstop people from all over the world come here and they're like visit for a few weeks just to see what it's like. Like, yep, I have to stay. But so I agree with your answer for maybe entrepreneur, but what does it mean to be an excellent one? What is the next level, right? Lots of people can start a company because they have some idea. It's a different story to make a successful company.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I'm glad you checked on that. Like, you could easily be like, well, it's just purely the returns of what, the company was when you sold it or went public or whatever. And then even then it gets complicated. It's like, what is it, the all-time high price? Is it the price when you left the company? Is it, if it was exited after, was it not a success? Right. So I think there's some level that can be like never ending and very unclear. I think there's probably some part which is, okay, you authentically put your heart into this for some period of time, right? It doesn't have to be forever. I mean, for me, it wasn't forever, right? But where you're like, I am going to put my entire heart into this. And you can see so many people like that, right? Again, whether it's a small business or a big one, and you can tell that they have that mindset where they're just all in. I think that's kind of one of the unique things about excellence. So it's
essentially you're essentially saying it's a mindset, right? It doesn't matter the exit multiple or the numbers, or even if you have an exit, it's actually about the mindset of trying to do something on your own and making it good.
I think so. Of course, it's nice to have an exit. I was very lucky to have one. And so I don't want I don't want to minimize that, right? But I also think that like in life, sometimes life isn't as fun if you focus just on the outcome versus putting your heart into it. And I think that's what I love about a lot of entrepreneurs.
Why do you think so many entrepreneurs, though, like how many that like actually get to the point where they're truly putting their heart into it? Like there's probably a difference. You mentored a lot of people. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between putting your real heart and soul into it versus like just giving it a shot? Being like, well, this is the cool thing to do. I mean, like you went to Harvard, lots of Harvard people who are like, this is, it used to be everyone goes through consulting and banking, and now it became a cool thing to go into tech. You and I were, I think, a little bit before that to give ourselves credit, but like they went into tech because, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and get into YC, and it's just like a credential checkbox versus like your heart and soul into it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one litmus test is, for me at least, is does every single thing that goes wrong, which is going to be a lot no matter what company, does it just destroy you? And I know that sounds like really bad and like, I don't know, sadistic or something like that, or sadomasochistic, because you're somehow wanting pain. But the truth is that I think a lot of founders I know that, like for me, with Gainsight, like every like negative NPS that we'd get from anyone, because I would read them all, every customer that was unhappy, every churn, every investor that passed on us, every single thing would consume me. And it's like, come on, get a life, like get perspective. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't have it, but I think that's where the lack of perspective is what causes some of these great things to happen, right? And I think it's true in a lot of, by the way, entrepreneur, you could say generalizes into people that are really passionate about their work. you think about the great musicians. We're in a beautiful sound studio right now, right? Looking at Jimi Hendrix, people like that. And like, they just like anything that was wrong, any key that was off, any performance that didn't go great, just destroyed them, and you see that, which I think there's something there.
There definitely is. And then then the question becomes, of course, how do you manage to stay sane on that journey, right? Because if it's truly consuming you, right? Jimi Hendrix, a lot of these other people didn't make it till old age. So, and now on the other hand, there's lots of successful quote unquote entrepreneurs, right? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all these other folks who do make it to, older age and things like that. Like they're not blown up the same way a musician might.
Yeah.
I'm like, how did you get through that all the days when you're like stressed?
I think there's a couple things, for me that I think about. One is that quite famous, I think it was Fitzgerald who had the quote that the test of first-rate intelligence is be able to hold two opposing ideas in your head at the same time and not go crazy, right? And like that concept where it's like everything matters at Gainsight. And look, Gainsight also doesn't matter that much. It's just a software company.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you have both of those and like not go crazy, but like certain periods of the day when you can remember, it doesn't matter. But when you're in it, you're all in. Because I think that being all in is like, it's infectious with the rest of the employees, with the customers, everything else. So I think that's part of it is having this duality. I think part of it then is for that part where you want to not be in it for a little bit, you find your thing, your dopamine hit that helps you. And we're just chemicals, right, in our brain.
Yeah.
And so, for me, like, a couple things. I mean, one probably, and I saw some stickers or laptops. So maybe same kids, right? My kids. And then another one is going to the gym.
Yep.
And then there's a couple other ones, but like basically we all have those where it actually does take you out of it. And I think there's something specific about doing things where you can't really use your phone as much. So obviously like go to the gym. And if you're not one of those annoying people at the gym who like sits like at a station and then like the people that are actually just like, working out hard or whatever they're doing, they're playing with the kids in the park and don't have their phone out. I think there's something about that then actually lets you go all in again the next day. Because I mean, the truth is like right before this, I had lunch with an entrepreneur and, right now there's a lot of people who are very burnt out. And it's one thing to be burnt out. He's been doing like, 10 years, 12 years, whatever. But some people are burnt out like a year or two.
100%.
And they're not able to actually do this like back and forth. It all matters. It doesn't matter. It all matters. It doesn't matter.
But don't you, I mean, you think it's a secret is you just have to find a way to get out a little bit and take your head out. And that's what the difference between like what excellent is versus others, right?
No, I don't think that. I think that's just one part of it.
Okay.
Because I think so it depends what you define as excellence. Excellence, like my starting point here was somebody who's all in. And I think that's being all in is something that people just kind of, some people are. And I think some people are about certain things and they just get really into it. Honestly, like it's kind of weird. Like I didn't ever as a kid be like, I really want to work in customer success software, right? And I just got into it and it was this nerdy little field. And I got super passionate about it. I got super obsessed. And then you maximize the opportunity that's there. Now there's a part of entrepreneurship that we haven't talked about yet, which is picking the thing. And that's look, anyone that's experienced will tell you the most important thing is not your culture or your values or how hard you work or anything else. It's the actual space. And the dynamics of the market, whatever. And so, for example, we could talk a lot more about Gainsight. We're all grateful and proud of what we did. But like the truth is, it's a small space. And so we built a $235 million revenue company in a market that had, at the time, $400 or $500 million of revenue, right? Like, so, versus if you are in a market that is giant, I think part of entrepreneurial excellence is then picking well and choosing or being thoughtful about where you bet, right?
Correct. But you don't have to be in that big business. Like you're going to be a very successful entrepreneur.
You can be successful. And then you just have to have it matched with your ambition.
What you're looking for.
And your capital structure and things like that. And I also think there's a part though, as much as we all like to intellectualize, including me, some of it is also just like grit and determination and a little bit of luck. Like you just look at Replit as a great example where many people know it's this insanely fast growing company, like got to 250 million of ARR in the last year and a half, but like they grinded it out. I mean, the founder is so impressive where he was like just super passionate about coding and did all of it before like agentic coding was a thing. And, and so it's kind of a little bit kind of cool that you see these people where they're like irrationally grinding it out and then the market comes to them.
I mean, as Sanders saying, it's like, it's a 10-year overnight success.
That was exactly right.
It seems like, oh my God, you crushed it. In reality, it's 10 years of you just grinding and no one knows.
I mean, anyone you're my age knows that like NVIDIA made video game cards, like the graphic cards. That's what I bought. I loved NVIDIA when I was a kid. Like I bought the graphics cards.
You should have saved your money and bought the stock.
Yeah, that would have been much smarter. That's going to come back when we talk about advice for a 30-year-old, but we'll save that for a bit.
So I agree with all that stuff. And like, how do you still make sure, like, so going back to your point about like the size of the market, right? So 12 years ago, you joined Gainsight.
Yep.
Why did you join a company that was in a space that like wouldn't have made sense to anyone at the time? And you already had some like good exits. You were a senior leader, I think, at Symantec, if I'm remembering right. Like
that's right.
You didn't need to go to, I don't know how big Gainsight was at the time, but probably TD.
No revenue, yeah.
It's like, why would you go join this no revenue company in a space that wasn't a thing?
Well, it's interesting because it comes back a little bit to like irrational passion, right? So I ran a SaaS company that was very small before Gainsight, and sold that. It's called Live Office, and had a great time. And the biggest challenge we dealt with, of course, was how do you retain your existing customers, right? We didn't have any systems for it. So I had some of that experience firsthand. And then I was spending time as an entrepreneur in residence at a VC firm at Excel, right? And I
did that twice. You were EIR.
EIR once at another firm called Trinity Ventures. EIR is like that, like when you don't know what you want to do.
Hang out with us, exactly. See cool sales. Like,
exactly. So anyways, I was in EIR at Excel to try to figure out what I want to do. And I was basically like, I'd written up this whole thing. I should do something in this customer retention, customer churn, blah, blah, blah. The term customer success wasn't widespread, but just like churn, And then I had a friend who's a partner at Battery Ventures, Roger Lee, who's still a very good friend. And he's like, I met these two guys, they're working this idea. I'm like, oh my God, like that's exactly the idea I had. And to their credit, they actually had like a beta kind of like product. And a few customers interested, but no real revenue. But something that was like, oh, that looked interesting. Of course, in hindsight, 13 years later, you rewrite the product like 100 times. So what we had then was unrecognizable now. But these two guys were great. We really hit it off. And so they were just kind of getting started. And I was like, I don't know. I just kind of like fell into it.
Yep.
And I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is a problem I know. I've faced it before. I've been the target customer. I know it's going to be a thing, and then obviously there's a lot we can talk about, kind of all the stories between, then and now, but it was amazing. It was kind of definitely not the biggest category in the world, but we were able to, we and the customers, everyone kind of really did something with it, which was fun.
And how did you, so why did you say to them, how do you even say to the two founders of this company, hey, bring me on board as CEO? Like, or what was the
it was interesting. They're so humble. It was the opposite. They were like, we'd love to work with you. It was like not a
really,
yeah, totally. I would never do. I mean,
so it wasn't like investors came in and like, hey, you need to take Nick on.
No. It was just like you meet these guys. They were thinking fundraising, stuff like that. So, and I think it
was like pre-seed basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. All the terms didn't exist like that. It was like, it ended up being like a kind of like a seed and then a series A. But yeah, there was no revenue or anything. So it was kind of just a very young company. But I just really thought like this could turn into something. And by the way, the other thing is, I will talk more about it. Sometimes you have a company that's like a wedge where you start with something and then you hope it can be something much, much bigger. And then, those wedges can sometimes work, sometimes not. But like that was something that we thought was like, we didn't know where this could go, but we're like, well, like CRM needs to be reinvented and maybe we can be part of that,
So you come on board super early. They're humble. Like, Nick's great. We want him to join our team. Was that right straight away? Like, we want you to be CEO, or is it more?
Yeah, it was.
It was. Okay, you're like, cool. Coming on as CEO, and they were humble enough to step back into other positions to help like build a product.
Yeah. One of them, Jim, who is an incredible like serial founder, he just likes to get that like very early kind of phase in some of the companies he's done, and so he stepped kind of back very shortly after. And then Sridhar, who was our CTO, who's amazing. He kind of was with us for probably 4 or 5 years, maybe something like that. I'm probably getting it right. Could be 5 or 6. And he did an incredible job. And then, we brought in obviously new people and all that stuff. So
how did you guys work out? Like, what do you recommend to founders? Should they be humble enough to bring someone on like you? Like, when should they think that they aren't the right? Like, what was a situation where you're like, hey, like this is a really early company. We want to bring in a potentially professional CEO. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I don't think this wasn't honest. I wish there was some playbook. Frankly, I don't think this kind of thing should or would happen. Okay. It's a very unusual thing where I was thinking of starting something. They were just a little further along. We just teamed up. So it's very much more organic. And it's really bizarre.
Forces.
They're very humble, these amazing people. And so there was no, there wasn't much of a pattern here. I think there's a different pattern, which is a company's, 10, 20, 50, 100 million revenue. And, for whatever reason, the founder doesn't want to run anymore. There's a new CEO, et cetera. That, to me, that's a more established pattern where there's like more learning. This one is just more like some people got together and we're all passionate about something.
Okay, so before we go even deeper on Gainsight, we're gonna have a lot of questions at Gainsight, of course, because it's such an amazing story. But like, go back to your own like life history a little bit, right? So I think you've said publicly you used to be very shy, all the other things. You're clearly not now. You have these amazing outfits. You're out there.
Oh, I agree. You fake it till you make it.
I mean, of course, but like, what was the secret there? Like, what did you do to change your persona or beat back shyness? Not that like shyness is necessarily a bad thing, but like to get to a point where you're this CEO and really successful CEO and board member and everything else.
It's interesting. I mean, it's funny because I think a lot of us, I don't remember who created the original research on extroversion, introversion, et cetera. It makes it seem much more binary than it actually is. I think a lot of us are in certain context more extrovert or not. And also a lot of us have things from our childhood that are still there, but then there's other things that kind of compensate. So my story is that, yes, I'm super lonely as a kid. And I just like literally ate alone every day from kindergarten, 12th grade, like I have no friends.
No friends at all.
Not at all. Like I would eat in the computer lab. It was one of those stories they would make the movie, the high school movie about with the sad kid and stuff.
So you were not voted as like most likely to be president of your class.
I was not at all in any consideration except the kid who did well in school. That's it.
What about family life? Were your parents just like normal parents? Like, what was that like?
I love my parents. I don't think anyone describes them as normal, but I'm just kidding. My mom, my dad is not with us anymore. But he was amazing. He was an entrepreneur, like running various kind of small businesses, like kind of local businesses, things like that. He's incredible.
So he was always working, probably.
He was working a lot, yeah. And then my mom was initially worked. Actually, my dad and my mom worked at a computer company, tech company in the 70s, and digital equipment. It's like,
of course,
people, 99.9% of people never heard of it. It was a very famous company back in the day. And then they my mom's, moved to kind of stay at home with us. And then my dad worked. But I think the thing that was relevant to this kind of line of questioning is I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a great place. Love it. Still like in my heart. It's a huge Steeler fan. But in the town I grew up in, there were very few Indian people in high school or any non-white people, right? And that was just one of those where like everyone was super nice. That there was nothing like that they did to me. It was more like I really felt like I didn't fit in, and I don't think it was just that. But I think that was part
of a lot in your head, though.
A lot in my head, and then probably I was super nerdy, and so there were just like a lot of reasons why I didn't fit in. I also, by the way, wasn't the kid who happily didn't fit in, like the loader. I was like, I wanted to fit in. I just
wanted to be a cool kid.
I sucked at it. Yeah, I would walk by the lunch, the tables of all the people and stuff. So yeah, you could
sit in the corner.
Definitely make a high school movie. What's interesting is, your question of like, why did it change so much? Because he did, and it's a very like disarming thing when people hear this story. Because it's so different that people that knew me the last few years would know. But my brother, would know that
younger or older.
Younger. He knows the whole journey, so he can see the through line, right? And the truth is, the through line is not a switch. In fact, I posted about this on LinkedIn recently. I am taking a break right now, spending time with my kids, things like that. When I volunteer at my daughter's high school, I kind of go sit in the corner of the room with I don't want to go talk to all the parents. I would love to. I don't actually know how to.
Yeah. So it's still you same.
So totally. And so I think what happened is sometimes, it's people that are a little less extrovert or they're a little more shy. When they have a context, it's easier. So you put me in a room to talk about AI. Yeah, I can talk to tons of people about SaaS or whatever. Right. But you put me in a cocktail party of people that I don't know to talk about, I don't know, The Weekend or Netflix or whatever normal human people talk about. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And of course I work on it, right? So I'm not just throwing my arms up. But I don't think the shyness went away, but I just found ways that I can be confident in certain situations.
Yeah, in certain situations you can do that.
Like being on stage. For example, I'm weird. I'm way more scared about going to a cocktail party than I am about speaking to 5,000 people.
Really?
Oh yeah. It's like the inverse of what most people would have.
But I mean, in some ways that makes sense, right? It's in a context you can do it. Do you think there's any, speaking of entrepreneurs in general, there's sort of a thesis, right? Sometimes your kid, who you were as a kid or your family life and how you grew up shapes who you end up becoming as an adult and what sort of entrepreneur you become. Do you think that was true for you, or how did it impact you? You could have been a great computer scientist.
Yes.
coding away in the corner your whole life and being very successful, I'm sure. And yet you're a CEO who's out there speaking happily to people.
Yeah. Who we are as children clearly directly affects everything we do. Right. And I think what's interesting is we forget that really like the vast majority of people's life is like a few things. It's number one, your genetics, right? Yep. Which none of us, we all are lucky or have what we have.
100%.
And then second is whatever that very early childhood environment is. And there might be a few others, but they're not that many. And so much is that. So for me, one of the things that's interesting is I've done a ton of personal development. I've worked with the same coach. Her name's Kaylee, for 15 years.
Wow.
And I remember meeting her and like to this day, nope, like she's a person that knows me better than anyone in the world, right? Yeah. Like literally better than family or anyone else. And one of the things that she does, and it's very popular amongst CEOs and other executives, is a test called Enneagram, Enneagram. And it comes from, psychology, and it's all about your childhood and like the things that you had. So some similarities to Myers-Briggs, which is more people are familiar with Myers-Briggs, but you get a number 1 through 9. Have you ever done it?
I've not done Enneagram. I've done Myers-Briggs, a bunch of times.
I've done another one. So I've done Enneagram like a million times. And actually it's been interesting because now I have give you a little twist on Enneagram. But early on, one of the Enneagram types I would get typed with is a 3. A 3 is a person who believes their self-worth is about achievement. Now, that doesn't mean you always have to. Like, the idea is you do work on yourself and you realize, even if I don't achieve, I'm still worth something. Like, that's the kind of general idea. But where you kind of start is, it's about achievement, which, by the way, growing up with immigrant parents where they really want to go to good colleges or whatever, like, that's logical that's what you would end up.
Right. They were pushing that.
It's totally. I mean, here in Silicon Valley, there's tons of Enneagram 3s, right?
I'm sure.
And then I have this other aspect, though, that's a little different, which is you basically kind of like think of it as like a major and a minor. The other side was an Enneagram 4, which is more about like curiosity, introspection, thinking deeply. Like I'm into like philosophy, poetry, understanding consciousness, stuff like that. And so I had these like two things that aren't at odds with each other, but a little bit different. And, over time I learned, oh, wow, those are just who I am. And then I can help manage them. For example, the Enneagram 3, one of the downsides is you can get so obsessed with comparative success. Yeah. Right. And we're here, it's pretty easy to do that.
Of course, you can see everyone's doing their next fundraiser round.
100%. And so like, I remember the early days of Gainsight where I'm running, this company, we were raising a round, and I don't know, we raised the round at a $60 million valuation. And then there was this company in a totally different space, but very hot company was like $1 billion or something. Right. And I think right now we're dealing with this too, where it's like the same thing's happening again.
Yeah. I was like, if you're not getting 1,000% growth year over year,
you feel terrible.
Correct.
And so then you kind of like can like remember, oh, that's my Enneagram 3 talk. And that's part of the story. It's not the whole story, right? And by the way, then you can be like, what can I bring to this? Well, this 4 part is unique to me. And that's where I got into like writing and these silly videos and all these other creative things that actually is kind of a little more unique for, in terms of what I bring to the table. And so I think there's so much value in learning who you are and kind of where your childhood stuff brings you, whether it's therapy, whether it's coaching, whether it's just taking these tests online. Highly recommend it.
I mean, so I would agree from a life perspective, from an entrepreneur perspective. Is it actually good? So I'll just play devil's advocate.
Yeah, do it. I love debating.
Is it actually a good thing? Like if you're an investor, right? Do you want to invest in that person who's just like, I'm just an utter killer. I have no life beyond my company. I might be totally messed up personal life. I kind of use Elon Musk as probably an example. Right. He really has no personal life and not a great father, all these other things. But man, everyone would invest in Elon any day.
I know. This is an interesting question, which is like, what are we optimizing for? So I think the truth is like, we should be like real. I'm glad you are. For investors, if their goal is to just make the maximum amount of money possible and sell the stock when it's at the maximum height, right? Which is their job. That's their job, right? Like they're doing the right thing. Yes. I mean, like a lot of what they're going to invest in is the people that just don't care about anything else. And not just, by the way, it's not just they don't care about anything else. It's like less introspective, less thoughtful, just go for it. Now the issue is that when you hit a speed bump or a downturn or a bubble, sometimes if you don't have the introspection, you don't get through it. Yeah. And so I think that's a little bit for an investor, it's a higher risk proposition. It's like, as long as I can go sell before whatever, everything comes out.
Before everything falls apart.
You should just invest in the craziest things and the weirdest people. Like you should just do it. Right. And now the other side though is I think one thing I feel like I always have to remind myself is there are things that are great for investors and they're not always great for the entrepreneurs or operators or executives or founders or whoever, right? it's not this, we don't have the same incentives, and that's nothing against them. They're doing what they should do, but we shouldn't assume we're playing the same game they are.
Yeah.
Because they have a portfolio, right? And by the way, they also get like 2% management fees and 17 houses and everything else. And like most entrepreneurs, especially if you're early in your career, you're like, this is your whole financial everything.
Yes. You have one shot. They're taking many shots.
Totally. So don't assume that the thing that is right for them is the thing that's right for you, right? That doesn't always work.
So how do you know how to split up that advice? Because you're going to talk to your investor and be like, I want advice. How do I keep my company growing? Do this or not? Like, just take more money from us and it will get you to this end point we need.
Yeah.
How do you separate the real advice to build a long-term successful company versus it's 1 or 0, right? Binary outcome. We're going to go for broke, which is what investors want. They want you to go crush it or go to 0 and they can move on.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that is a more general answer, and then I'll come to specifics to investors. I think a useful thing I try to do whenever I meet anyone to ask for advice is I try to just calibrate on, okay, what is their universe? What are their incentives? Not that they're ever trying to give me bad advice. No, but very few people trying to give me bad advice. But everyone has bias based on just like what they know and what they do. And, I went to, a lunch with a friend who's at a large company, and he's like, yeah, like the best place to be right now is large companies, right? You go talk to private equity people. They're like, the best thing to do is private equity, right? And so you have to kind of calibrate.
They've bought into their own narrative.
They have their own, and it's totally, we would too. Like I would absolutely, this is just like what we are.
Yep.
And so I try to remember, like at the end of that lunch or that coffee or that Zoom or the call, oh yeah, let's remember, like they told me X, but also what did they know? And is that as X right? Or is X what they know?
Yeah.
Now for investors specifically, I think their advice is super helpful and they're really smart. Like there's VCs, you don't get into that job. It's like very, very tough job to get into for the top firm. So you get in there because you're very smart. However, one of the things to remember is they themselves are in their own little like journey for their career. So for example, I think it's helpful to calibrate where the investor is in their career. Are they early in their career, which because they're trying to make a name for themselves, they're trying to maybe get up to like a full partner because they're not full partner yet. They're worried about like negatives. They're making a micromanage a little more, or are they like, they've made it, in which case, by the way, if they've made it, they may be like, this should either be like huge or nothing, right? Like I mean, I've never met Pinocchio, so obviously he's all-time legend, but like if you got somebody like him on your board, I think it'd be amazing. And also I can imagine he'd be like, this better be big. Was like, it's already a multi-billionaire. He's already
You're really excited by some little 50 minutes.
Totally. And so he's going to push you. And this entrepreneur I had lunch with right before this, he was like, they have this good business and then they raised money from a giant firm. I won't say which one, a few years ago, and raised a ton of money. And then it like made it so like now this good business can't be good anymore. Right. And
there's a lot of,
a lot of people like this, right?
Stories.
And so I think a lot of it comes down to like really understanding that investor, what their incentives are, where they are in their career, what matters to them, and not getting starstruck.
Yeah. And speaking briefly a little bit more of VC, why did you never go into VC? Or who knows, maybe you're good suit, but you not do VC, right? You would obviously the opportunity if you're going to be an EIR, that's sort of also like quasi training ground, maybe come work there at the firm. Why didn't you go in that direction?
It's so interesting because I mean, none of us ever know, like, do you make the right call or not, right? Because we don't know the counterfactual. But like you
did all right.
It's worked out okay. But like in the 2007 time frame, I was trying to figure out what I want to do. And I remember meeting a very well-known VC firm. And the kind of like head of that firm at the time said, he's like, hey, think about coming over here and joining us, right? As a junior partner, whatever, like wash the dishes in the kitchen kind of thing. And then I was like, wow, I really want to run my own company and I want to do my own thing first. And he's like, what he said to me, I'll never forget because it's so funny. It was so like hilariously inappropriate. He's like, if you come back to me in a few years, you're going to be too old. And it was like, oh, damn. And so I had that period where there is a thing, which is to get into venture, you have to be young because you have I understand why they say it. They want people with a network of other young people who tend to be the people who start companies. I totally get it. And so I kind of didn't do it because I was like, I just love that whole team leadership. There's some element that I just really enjoy. And so I had a chance to do that a couple of times. It's been amazing. And then we talk more about it later. Now I'm just like, now I've done that. So now I'm like, what do I want to do? So I actually don't know the answer for the future.
Yeah.
But the answer in the past was I wanted to run my own company. And it was probably irrational financially. But, it worked out okay.
But in the end, I mean, if you're following your passion, and passion's sort of a weird word, but like let's put it, you're following your passion, like that's going to always lead to some better level of success in trying to do something else just because.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This passion, follow your passion thing. I think there's a little bit of there's a bit of false advice there for young people and everyone, which is some of your passion is simply what you get good at. And so I will say I'm passionate about things I'm good at. Is it because I'm passionate or because I just got good at them? And so a lot of getting good at things tends to be some foundational stuff and then just lots of time, right? Stacking the time on. Yep. And so like I'm good at decent at some parts of leadership or whatever, right? And it's fun. And is it my passion? Yeah. But is it like some inherent passion? I don't know. Like there's an alternate world where I did go into investing and I could have been good at it. I think the thing though that is true is investing, a lot of people say, is much more isolated. And at the time, perhaps compensating for this whole like shy kid thing, I was like, I like the leadership thing because we're all together, right?
Yeah, it's like you doing your own deal.
Totally. And so that's the one thing I think that it seems to be pretty consistently true is investors don't have as much of that social interaction at work.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, for me, at least, like I've done, a huge number of investments.
Yeah, you've done a ton, man.
And and it's actually gone, I would actually brag a little bit. Like, I think my record is probably better than the large majority of VCs.
That's amazing.
It is, which is great. But the reason I've never gone into it full time, and it's always been sort of a side thing, is mostly because I hated when I would invest. I give lots of advice, help out, early believer, all that stuff, because I'm an early investor. And then I just wait for 10 years and I big exit. I'm like, well, I did basically nothing except early on. And there's no ownership. There's no feeling of satisfaction. Yeah, I get a check, but like, that's not what I'm in there for. I like building the company, like being a part of it and like seeing the struggles every day, right? Like after we do this podcast, I have to go back to figure out how we keep growing my own company. That's exciting and challenging.
Yes.
And investors don't really have that. Like, you give a little bit of advice, maybe once a quarter, once a year, and that's it. And move on. It's
interesting because I think there's an element where I am at my best when I'm just grinding and pushing, and you have all those everyday little things. And that, I think you're right, that tends to be more true on the operating side. I think investors, you have to grind because you have to raise money and all the things you probably have to do, but it's a different thing. And I think it's important for people to figure out, what they're into,
Correct. And going back to the passion stuff, just because I think it's a great point too. I'm also in agreement with you in the sense that like, there is no such thing as passion. Like, people, it's sort of a BS statement, actually, in some ways. Or what passion is what you said. Yeah, I'm passionate when you get good at something, because when you get good at it, you start getting accolades. People start
totally.
And that means you get better and better because you get bigger chances to do things in a bigger way,
right?
That are harder, that push you further. Next thing you know, you're like the world's expert at customer success.
Yes,
and you're
exactly.
Like, that is not what your 18-year-old self graduate high school would have said you would be doing.
Yeah.
And now you're the world expert at it because you just get good at it and things grow.
Yeah.
And that's what becomes passion. Like, I think there's a whole thing about the passion hypothesis, and I'm very much a believer of.
I love it. That's awesome.
That's what it is. And it's same with music, right? People can say music is my passion. Well, like, it's only your passion if you get really good at it. And if you're really good at it, then sure, you'd probably be in a band and like you might be touring. But otherwise, like, it's a fun side hobby. It's not your passion.
And I mean, I'm listening to, it's a little late to the party, but like, you know, I'm a Bruce Springsteen fan, right?
Sure.
And so I don't know if you ever read Born to Run or listened to it or not.
No.
It's his autobiography, and it's amazing, and especially listen to it because you get to hear his voice. But it's what you said. It's not this like, oh, I'm passionate about music and that's all that matters. Like, he wanted to be successful. He wanted to feel like there was an audience, that people were there, that his records would sell, right? Like, these are real human things most people have. I don't know how many people in the world don't care at all if things work. I mean, I think a lot of people, we're human. We want to see some feeling like things are working. Investing is hard because you're right. Like, you don't see those daily.
Wait 10 years to see if there's a return. Like,
crazy.
I get to know tomorrow if my new sales motion.
Yeah.
Sane does great for me.
Right.
So yes, I totally agree. I'm glad we're both on the same page for investors. Love them. Also dislike them sometimes. Like, it's all right. But and actually with Chore, by the way, my company, we're fully bootstrapped.
Yeah, I know. That's awesome, by the way.
Right.
It's so interesting to having been in the sort of more like VC type world, investing and operating, and now control it yourself.
Yes, it's a different world and kind of exciting. And it's just you eat what you kill. And
exactly.
Pretty exciting. So going back to your history, right? So you're graduating high school, super shy kid. How did you end up, like, what was the path that ended up becoming an entrepreneur, starting these companies?
Yeah.
Getting acquired.
I mean, I think so. It's kind of interesting because there are things where you as a child and as a kid, you kind of some things get implanted in you or whatever. So my dad running these small businesses, and he had this thing, sadly, where he always thought he could have done more. And actually there was this time, interestingly enough, where he, in the 80s got recruited. He was running like a small software company bootstrapped in Pittsburgh, and he got recruited by Kleiner Perkins to run a company in California.
Wow.
And he turned it down. Now, get this, you'll laugh, but turned it down because the image at the time, I grew up in the 80s, and the image at the time was California. All the kids were on drugs all the time.
So kids can
as this Indian immigrant family, he's like, I can't go to California.
Wow.
Now, unfortunately, that's the funny part, that later, sadly, he kind of had a lot of regret about not pursuing things as much.
Yeah.
And so I think I had some of that,
but he sacrificed for his kids in a sense.
Yeah, he sacrificed, definitely sacrificed. I mean, parents insanely sacrificed for the kids, for sure. But, still can be regret.
For sure.
And so I had some of that, just entrepreneurialism, seeing my dad, desire to do more, seeing what he wasn't able to do in some of those fields, which isn't, I don't want to carry all of that, but there's some of that naturally bleeds over. And actually, interestingly enough, I was out with some friends, other CEOs, and they were like, what were you like in high school? It's basically your question. And I was like, okay, let's try this. So I went in Dropbox, and you know how in Dropbox, you sometimes can have files from a million years ago, because you have a drive that you backed up somewhere and whatever. I somehow had my high school college admission essays.
Wow.
That's the application things. And one of them was where do you want to be in 25 years? And it was literally running a company, a tech company, blah, blah, blah. That was very self-indulgent high school essay where it's the sun sets on Nick's company. It was so cheesy. But I was oh, so I actually really always wanted to do this.
Do you think that came from your dad's regret?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it takes the therapist to figure that out. Right. It's pretty straightforward. And then, went to college. And what's interesting is, my mom, I think partially she saw the hard part of entrepreneurship being the spouse, and for whatever other reasons, she was really wanted me to be a doctor, which again is not very shocking. Being an immigrant kid, totally. And so so this is perhaps shows you something else about me, which is desire to please my parents. I got to college and I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to major in biochemistry. And so I did my bachelor's in biochemistry, and at 2 years in, I didn't like it. I was okay at it. I wasn't great, but I also didn't like it. And I had classmates who really loved it. I was so impressed by them, and I didn't. And so I was there's something wrong. And so then there was a thing where you could do a master's in parallel if you took enough AP things or whatever. And so I did my master's in CS, and I was oh yeah, that's what I love. I programmed when I was a little kid, play video games, all the normal nerdy kid stuff. And so I got to go back to that. And then actually ended up meeting a classmate in CS class. So we started a company college, and that's what brought me to California.
That's crazy. Okay. So you come to California, get acquired by Semantic. Yeah. And then next thing you know, you're at Gainsight after a few, many years, of course. But
there was a lot of yada, yada, yada there, but we'll speed it up.
So going back to Gainsight then, so now you're at Gainsight. You're what, 3 people, 5 people?
Yeah.
Walk through sort of that genesis of the company growing over 12 years.
Yeah.
All the different fights. How did you change, I'd love to talk culture, recruiting, hiring, building the business up in every stage, because I'm sure it changed.
Yeah, totally.
Multiple times.
Yeah, so many times. I mean, I'll try to hit a couple milestones just off the cuff, and we can dig into any of those, right? So one milestone, which is very unique for this company, was we were trying to build software for a job, customer success management, chief customer officer, and you know that world a little bit. And, but in 2013, when we started, that job didn't really exist that much. Maybe there was a few hundred in the world or a few thousand, right? And I'm talking about a few thousand people. Yeah. If you thought you charge software $1,000 a seat or $2,000 a seat, the company could be maximum a few million bucks in revenue, right? And so we had this thing where we're we got to get more people to do it. Now we had the belief, which is right, that more and more SaaS companies would get created, more of them would have retention challenges, et cetera. And so the first milestone was really focusing on marketing the category, not just the product. And this is why Gainsight gets kind of known for category creation a lot. I'm not the only company that did it by any ways. And we learned a lot from predecessors of course, Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot, et cetera.
Salesforce.
Right? All great companies. But what we said was, okay, let's go evangelize this category. And actually there was this night, it was March of 2013, I think. And we had an office on Castro Street in Mountain View above a bar. And this tiny little crappy office, like the paint, the carpet was peeling off the floor. The worst part was there was like literally 2 bathrooms, like a men's and women's. It was like, and we had like, eventually had like 50 people in this place. It was just,
the
it
bathrooms
was
were getting
gross,
destroyed.
just gross situation. And so definitely like health hazard type. But we were like, okay, maybe what we need to do is just bring people in this job together in a community. So let's do a meetup. And so March 2013, we do this meetup. We send out an email to like some people that we know that were like CSMs. There weren't that many in the world, like, but there were some in Salesforce, some a couple other companies. Invite goes out. I literally personally go to like Safeway and get like, some wine, like the really cheap wine.
Yep.
And then Safeway's a grocery store if you're not based in the Bay Area, and the really cheap cheese trays, right?
Yep.
And then we come back to the office and we put up like our plastic tables. Actually, our main table is a ping pong table. So literally on the ping pong table, there's all these like really, really crappy appetizers. And then we open the door. And literally that night, we thought like 20 people would come, like 80 people came.
Wow.
And it was buzzing. And literally, we kind of had to kick them out at the end. Because what it wasn't about us. They wanted to talk to each other, right? This is what community is all about. And so we said, wow, that is something. And I had this, I had marketing at the time, my CMO, who's still a dear friend and legend, and his name's Anthony Kennedy. I don't know if you met him.
I don't know.
But he was our first CMO. And he and I were like, actually, he was like, we should throw out a bigger event. And he had this kind of, vision for a bigger event. And that was something we called Pulse, P-U-L-S-E. Now we called it Pulse because we didn't want it to be about Gainsight. We wanted it to be about the category. Again, this theme of category creation. So we threw it. First year was like, literally, we thought 100 people would show up.
Pulse being like, you want your customers, do they have a pulse?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of probably what we were thinking, but it was just like a nice name. Yeah. And then we had like about 300 people show up the first year in San Francisco. And then it went to like, I don't know, 600, 900, 2,000.
So was that like the hint you're like, we're on to something?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, like
we're in this room
here.
Literally, we're in this 300 person event in San Francisco. That was going to be 100, 200. And the like somebody pulls the fire alarm, which I'm assuming is like one of our competitors. I don't know who. And like the whole building evacuates, and like there's so many people, they can barely fit. And I was like, oh, this might be something.
Yeah.
And that was like one of those moments where there's very few people that like were there kind of end to end, but like that's what the people remember. That's like what we remember from those early days. So we did a lot of that. We ended up writing a bunch of books. Actually, I was involved, very gratefully involved in 4 books, writing 4 books. There was a 5th written by 2 other Gainsters. And so, on all the best practices, and everything, thousands of LinkedIn posts, which if you're watching, you probably have been the unfortunate victim of reading every now and then. All of we talked more about culture, music videos, all these things, but basically it was all about creating this category and this community. And we created executive events and all that. And so to this day, actually, interestingly enough, like today, yesterday, Friday, I get texts from people from that community just checking in.
Really?
Like, how are you doing? I miss you, blah, blah, blah. Right. And it's awesome. It's like this thing that's really unique. So the first phase was creating a category and community. Then there was this competitive phase, which we can talk about, but we had some competitors, some really smart venture-backed companies. Mm-hmm. But because we had the category, a little bit more of the community, all that, I think we were just very fortunate to be able to move ahead. And then you have this virtuous cycle where you can build a better product because you have more resources and you can invest more, you have a bigger community. And so we had our own little flywheel that kind of kept going. And then I could talk more about like fundraising and exits and all that. But then we went through kind of different phases, became multi-product, all that. So yeah.
Like so early on, you're getting this going, getting this flywheel going, you're getting your software at the door, getting customers. Like, how are you building the team? Like, how are you changing as CEO too? Like,
yeah.
How did some of the big things you're like, gosh, we're now like 20 people. I need to do something different. Like, how did you switch over? Like, what advice do you give people as the company keeps growing to change themselves as a leader?
It's kind of interesting because, I mean, I'll tell you some specific advice, but I will say that I found the founder mode post, which I'm sure you read.
Yeah, of course.
Everyone read it. If you haven't read it, it's like this very famous, kind of quoting Brian Chesky, founder of Airbnb. And when I read it, it was so validating. And I was like, I don't know. Part of it is you don't change too much. Like I was the person that read every NPS and called tons of customers every week and tried every new product feature out myself and gave feedback to the engineers in the beginning. And I was that same person at the end with a couple $100 million in revenue. And like, I almost wish I had never taken my foot off the gas at all. I know that sounds like very like counter to the stereotypical advice of scaling and all that. And I think, by the way, one of the mistakes people make, I made a billion times, is when you hire leaders that are, kind of executives or whatever, like, hiring the people that don't want that mindset. And then you feel like you need to back off because they need their space, but then they're not all in it. And they're not in the details, then nobody's in the details. And then you fire them later, by the way, because you eventually figure it out. And I have happened so many times. And eventually I was like, no, I only really want people that are super in the details that work for me.
So then that leads to a lot of questions about hiring. But before we even get there, like, how are you able to stay in the weeds though, as you keep growing as a company without also being kind of a micromanager, right? The way you're describing, like, oh, it sounds like Nick's a micromanager, but you're probably not, but it sounds like you are.
Yeah. It's an interesting, I think I'm this is, somebody needs to make the term. I'm a micro learner.
Okay.
Where I want to know as much as possible.
Okay.
I don't need to like opine on everything. In fact, I think one mistake that I definitely made, and probably a lot of people make, is opining on things that don't actually matter, And so I think there's some element where eventually I learned, okay, what matters, be super all in on, So I was never the person that was like, hey, what's the color of the office art? Right. By the way, if somebody's into that, that's great. No problem. But I think you can't be doing that and be like designing your HR system and be thinking about your website and be doing and.
But then how do you choose, right?
So for me, it's like, what are the things that will radically change the company? Now, I would say in application software, what are the things? Well, the number one thing by order of magnitude is the markets you're in. And what does that mean as a CEO? I wrote a post about this a while back, which was like, constantly think about the new things you're going to do. So what if I did one thing differently on the business side of Gainsight, it would be to have more aggressively expanded what we do.
From product perspective or market perspective, maybe.
Well, it's kind of both, but like things that there was enough adjacency that it wasn't going to just consume a ton of capital, right? Like not launching a food delivery service, right? But like something that would keep growing our TAM, because the thing that kills companies, a lot of them, is simply you start eating into the end of your TAM and your growth slows. And then everything kind of starts just becoming more mediocre. Right. And so I kind of think for me, it's what are the things that really help the company? And then also what can I actually be good at on those, And so for me, those were things like, what is the market and the strategies that we can go? And again, I wish I'd gone even faster. It was customers, because in a higher touch business, a CEO can materially impact the business by being super close to customers.
By like talking to them all the time.
Totally. Learning, blah, blah, pitching, sales calls. You can really drive it. I mean, that's like, it would just be sometimes in bigger deals, this happens in a lot of categories. It'll be like, you're in that, if it was in person, you're signing into the lobby of that customer. And then like you look up the sheet and that was your competitor's CEO.
Yep.
Right. And so it actually happened a few times. One time we had a bake off with like one of our early little competitors and like the customer had us back to back in the same room and all the swag from that other competitor, they strategically like had it left there.
Smart.
And so for me, it was customers. It was thinking about strategy. It was being the defender of the culture, because the culture, both because I care about it, but also the culture for us was actually one of the reasons people bought from us.
Yeah.
So it was actually really mattered a lot.
How could your customers understand your culture? Like,
it's funny. It's so interesting. It's when you meet people, the culture of anyone, right? Their values, their culture, it in like 2 minutes. Like you can't necessarily articulate it in words.
You just can feel it.
But if you just ask like any Gainsight customer and you're like, which I ask so many, I'm like, why'd you buy from Gainsight? They're like, okay, number one, community, the community you built. Number two, the culture of the people you work with. Number three, you have an awesome product that's really good. But it was always in that order,
Interesting. Okay. So then going back to your point about like going to new categories, new things, how did you make sure still that you didn't get like SOS, right? So SOS is shiny object syndrome.
Yes.
Right. So it's very easy the founder to be like, oh, I need to go into this new area or try this out.
Totally.
And you have lots of ideas. Like, I have lots of ideas all the time. And I try to sort of tell my team, like, I have lots of ideas, we can ignore them, but like we have priorities. But how do you make sure you do that in a smart way to not, because the CEO, people are just going to end up saying yes to a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great question. I think part of it is you can only do one of those things at any given time. So I think like that was one thing I thought a lot about. There was a bunch of things I'm like, how come we didn't do that? How come we didn't do that? I'm like, that wasn't the one. I have one like new thing the company can do in any part of our business, right? New product, new market, new whatever. One thing I can kind of do by edict at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's by the way, in the early days, it's simple things. Like, for example, like we were started a long time ago. So like when, Amazon S3 was like a newish thing, I was like, we need a better connector. And so literally I was just like, we're going to do Better Connector. And there was like this long email chain, why we can't or something. And we did it.
Yep.
Right. But I couldn't have said we're going to do that. And then these other 5 things, And so I think for me, part of it is I get one thing at any given time that I can force and that I have to make happen. And then everything else is a little bit more like, hey, you got to like motivate, influence, etc. I think where the micromanager and the shiny object syndrome comes in is the CEO or whoever who kind of dives in, like says, go do X, gets distracted, goes, does something else, comes back, doesn't even remember, maybe now change their mind. That really pissed me off, people off, by the way. Right. And so you got to watch out for that.
Yeah. Changing your mind is the worst. I mean, so you come, you one big thing, that's it. How did you build a culture though, of also trying to move fast? Like, what did that look like to where you're like, we're a fast moving culture?
Yeah.
Like, how did you create that mindset? Okay, great. I can maybe just talk about culture in general. Like, what does it mean to build a great team? What does that culture look like? And then also one that moves quickly, especially in today's world where it seems like if you're not a $100 million company in 12 months, you're going too slow.
So I think there are two things, two parts to your question. And I'd say the second part I'll answer a little bit, but I wish we'd done even more. So the speed thing is, I think, a real challenge for a lot of companies, including every company of our era. But on what does it take to build a great culture? It kind of comes back to your entrepreneurial excellence.
Or what is great culture?
What is great culture? It's a very, very philosophical thing. I think I really respect the idea that we have lots of cultures. In fact, I wrote about this recently where I was like, even when we think about AIs embodying human values, I'm like, I don't want them to embody one set of values, because like the way the world works well is all of us have different values, and we kind of like the market like brings us the best of every
ideas in a sense.
Market ideas, exactly. And so I think the same thing is true of cultures. I'm glad company cultures are different. And I think to me, the worst company culture is the one that isn't different, doesn't stand out. I think company culture should be like, you go to their website, you read it, and a lot of people are like, I don't want to work there. That's why I really respect, I respect a lot, which is very, very different culture from Gainsight, is Coinbase. They were just very like counter conventional, particularly like in the kind of 2020, 2021.
Yeah, they were getting all the DEI stuff.
They totally. And that's not a comment on like the specifics. Yeah. Like, it's more like they just said, I have friends who work there and they just really know what they stand for. Yeah. And so we did, for sure. We have these 3 values we came up in the beginning of Gainsight: golden rule, success for all, and childlike joy. Wow. And then 4th and 5th were beginner's mind and stay thirsty. And so those 5 values, literally 2013, we added 2 in 2015, and then to now.
It's the same.
And, when we bring new employees on and I'd say, hey, what's the most unique thing about Gainsight? I thought they would talk about the business or product or something. They'd all be like, we didn't think your values are real, but they actually are, which feels good, right? Yeah. Now, how do you actually translate that? Because those
a lot of people write a good mission statement and values and all this other stuff, and not everyone lives up to it.
Totally. And then how do you make it turn into the speed that you were talking about? So the good news about the first part of your question is I really cared about these. Like, these are actually kind of like a articulation of my personal values. Yeah. Right. And
does that have to be the case for every company too? Like the company's values are kind of
I kind of think they do. Okay. I mean, I think it's very hard otherwise, because the company is a hierarchy. And, it's sort of the definition. It's the structure, right? And so if that person isn't waking up and thinking about it, I've got very cringe CEO events where somebody will be like, oh yeah, we just created new values. They're super excited about them. And I'm like, oh, what are they? And they're like, actually, I don't remember.
You're like, okay.
And I'm like, the CEO doesn't know the values. What the hell, right? And so I think there is this thing where you kind of have to really personally care about them. For me, it was like, my thing in the world is I want to have a company that has people that treat people the way they want to be treated. Golden rule. Like, that's actually something that is just, it's not like I want everyone in the world to do that. They have to. It's more like in my little sphere of influence, I care about that. Yep. And so then we turned all of that into like a purpose statement that also was a little weird at the time, although now is really incredibly stood the test of time. To be living proof you can win in business while being human first. And human first is the idea that like, everyone you meet, whether it's a job candidate, somebody you turned down, somebody that turned you down, a customer, somebody that churned you, an investor that passed on you, they're ultimately human beings. They had a childhood. They have fears. They have things with their kids. They have challenges, right? And we easily forget that. And so what was interesting is that human first concept, which is kind of like the umbrella over our culture, it is so real. And it became so real in our community that if you go on LinkedIn right now, anyone watching can do this, and just type in human-first, you'll find all these CS people that put on their LinkedIn profile. Not that work at Gainsight.
became a thing.
It became like
if you're good at CS, you're a human first person.
Literally. And it's crazy because we didn't like tell them to do that. So that was kind of cool. Now speed, let's hit on that. Because you hit the thing that I actually am still unhappy about.
Yeah.
And you can, Chuck Ganapathy is my successor. He was my president. He's now CEO. And we talked about this all the time. How hard it is to get an existing company to move faster, right? And this is some of the part of the innovator's dilemma, right? All that stuff. But these new companies are doing the 996, and whether they're working 996 doesn't matter. They are obsessed with speed.
Yep.
I read a blog post by, you probably saw Gamma raised a huge round, right? Yep. And great for them. And like, they just run an experiment every morning and they they test things.
Which is new product managers. Exactly. They're doing that. New product in the morning, build it, vibe code it, test in the afternoon, iterate again the next day.
How awesome is that? And I think that's not just working harder. It's a different mindset, right? It's like you do it now. And I think there's a great book and business book. Did you ever read Amp It Up?
No.
Frank Slootman.
Good book.
Obviously,
CEO.
He's like all-time legend CEO, right? And he has this chapter where he talks about when somebody would say, hey, I can get this thing done by next Tuesday. And he would say, well, what about tomorrow? And not to be a jerk about it, but just like, hey, why do you need to wait that long? Yeah. Let's talk about it. What are you waiting for somebody else's approval? Let's skip the approval, right? And so I think there's some element, which I was trying to drive towards the end, of how do we re-engineer the mindset of speed? Because what was happening is I think all the older SaaS companies are operating at a speed that we thought was fast.
Right. At the time it was fast.
And now that speed is slow. And Chuck, our new CEO, is doing a great job of changing that. So
even though it felt fast at the time, where did you maybe go wrong where you didn't push it fast enough? Was it like, hey, I don't want to bother people too much. They deserve to have a break in the weekend.
Totally.
Where did you go wrong?
I think one of the cultural mistakes that we made that we did a lot of things right in the culture and I'm really proud of it. But one of the mistakes we made, and actually I've talked about this with a lot of early Gainsters, some execs you and I both know, and Chuck too. And it's there's a line of, okay, where are you empowering your employees? Where are you making almost coddling them to the point where it's almost patronizing? Yeah. You have to do it for them, right? You have to help them manage. I think we kind of, as a society, got into this a little bit in 2020, 2021 of the company needs to help you manage your own work-life balance, right? It's no, the company shouldn't be jerks to you at all. And they should treat you well and care about you. But you're the one who decides whether to turn your phone off on a Friday night. Not the company.
And you'll know if it's the sort of culture that expects you, though, to have it on. Some cultures expect you to have it on.
And then you can choose whether you want to work there. That's great, too. Yep. And so I think the mistake that we made, which I think we're changing, a lot of companies are changing, is just not respecting employees more, that they can do it and they can figure it out, right? That's different than being liked, as the whole like versus respected, right? It's I respect them. I respect them so much. I'm going to be honest with them. I'm going to tell them the reality. I'm going to push them because I believe in them. I'm not going to assume they can't do it and say, oh, well, they couldn't handle it. Right. And so I actually think there's a pernicious side to coddling, where it's you're not really respecting the person. Absolutely. I think that's something we were trying to evolve in the last few years.
Is there a way to make sure that you don't create a culture of everyone needs extra approvals, right? So it's very easy. Especially for CEOs you were I want to get into the details and the weeds. Next thing you know, you're the ultimate approver for every project.
A good point. Yeah. I think that's where it is dangerous of being involved in too many things. Mm-hmm. And so that's where,
There's always safe as an employee. If I'm if the CEO is looking at my project, I'm going to just go to the CEO every time and say, hey, what about this?
Totally.
This change.
And it's interesting.
The CEO updated.
And it's interesting because I think there's some elements where you're look, if you're really good at the thing as a CEO, whatever the thing is, the thing could be you're a former designer and you're just an expert at design, right? The thing could be you're a former finance person and you know the numbers inside out, right? For me, what was interesting is if you ask Gainsters, where did Nick consistently always have to be the approver? It was everything related to our conference.
That was it. That was one thing.
There were other ones that kind of came and went.
Probably consistent.
By the culture would be the other one. But and they were kind of related to each other. The conference, what was interesting is, honestly, I got pretty good at it. And by the way, the real credit goes to the people that did the events work, woman named Kat and Lauren and stuff. They're the ones that, but in terms of the higher level of what is a good keynote on stage? What's a fun theme? how do you bring people together? Like I've learned so much over the years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not some expert from birth, but I just learned a lot. And same thing with culture. And so I think one of the things to really inventory is, where are you truly world class, right? I think we are all better off for the world that Steve Jobs micromanaged all the user experience for all Apple products. We are, because he's the best probably ever. And so we're better off. But if the average SaaS CEO or whatever, the AI CEO is micromanaging, I don't know, like how you're going to do performance reviews for your HR thing, is that a good use of your time? I don't know.
I don't think it is at all. But how does a founder get good at handing that stuff off and essentially delegating? So what I mean by that is I come across so many founders, right? This is sort of our own business, but like, no, like I think I can handle managing like our payroll system, or, these things are small. They only take a few minutes.
Yeah, it's your world, right?
And it's like all these things compound and actually slows you down massively.
Totally.
But so many founders are terrible at saying, I'm going to delegate that away. Like that is just, my time is too precious. What is the advice you would give to people to say, like, this is when you should delegate, and know that your business is only going to be successful if you focus on things that you're world class at, not at all the small things that maybe make you feel good in the moment. But
yeah, it's interesting because I mean, we have all gotten so used to delegating, hosting our computers, right? Like in Amazon,
yes,
right.
Like, do you see Jeff Bezos's like famous like make your beer taste better?
No, it was probably that way.
That's what you're saying. Yeah, you're saying that.
So I love what you're saying, and I think that there's some element where if somebody analyzes these types of things from a perspective of purely like, how many minutes or hours a week am I spending? Oh, I'm not spending that much time. And you probably get that every day. That's not that much time for me. I think the thing that is the cost is the context switch. So like like in the server hosting world, like luckily most people don't have to deal with that anymore unless you're doing GPU hosting. Most people don't have to deal with the actual infrastructure. But back in the day when people did, you were dealing with like, oh, the power went out in the data center cage and somebody is waking up and going. And yeah, it wasn't a lifetime over the course of a year, but for that day, it's stuck. And everything, you canceled every meeting and you didn't do customer stuff. And so the question is like, if one of your potential clients like ran into like a payroll or HR issue, legal
which they will.
And then it's going to and they're going to have to learn all this random stuff that has zero value for the business. And so I'm a big believer that you have to get better at what is the actual content of your business. What's the context?
Yeah. So actually we used to have a quote on our website that said, hiring chore is when you go from becoming a founder to a CEO. And it's that ability to delegate things is when you become the CEO. Just to tell you your story, because it's actually you should go watch the video.
Yeah, I will.
As put up, there's Stanford class he taught basically talked about, there was a whole thing I'll probably butcher it for everybody, so apologies, but in Belgium or something, when all the early breweries were there, they initially created their own power supply, right? This is when electricity first started. They essentially created their own power company.
Oh, wow.
To power making beer. So like help the brewery make better beer, make more beer for a while. Then dedicated power companies came out. And guess what? The breweries that still exist today are the ones that delegated away their power company business, said, we want to make great beer. We need to make great power. And they handed that off to the power companies. And those still exist. And then Jeff goes into why.
So the implication, the other ones that tried to keep making their own power,
they
actually went out of business.
Because they were trying to do, are they great power companies or are they great breweries?
Yeah.
And this story then, of course, leads into AWS and why.
Totally.
No one today, like I tell founders, like, why are you building a server in your garage? No, of course not. I use AWS. So why would you do any of these other things that you shouldn't be doing?
Right.
How far does that go for companies, right? So like for Gainsight or companies you work with and advise, how far do you delegate, right? Are we in a world, and people said famously, there's going to be a company of one founder and everything else can be delegated.
You're right.
What does that really look like today? Like what should a company keep? For?
I mean, I think that ultimately it's got to be tied to like the business that you're in. So like, for example, if we picked like you're starting a coffee shop, sourcing of beans, things like that, you probably don't delegate initially, right? Like, or retail operations.
Do what you love and
maybe you do it.
Find the best
and right, exactly. But let's say you're building like an enterprise AI-based SaaS company or something, right? There's a lot that you would delegate. Most likely you're probably like, you'd be like, well, the core is we want to build this awesome product, right? And then we want some level of customer intimacy. Now, sales, CS, we can blend those roles together, but customer people and stuff like that, right? But yeah, you would start, especially in this agentic world, you'd start saying, well, okay, everything else, I would love to not deal with it, right? Why am I like figuring out the accounting software to use? Why am I, the amount of time, by the way, like we all spend on that stuff is insane.
Correct.
And meetings, and they're so boring, by the way. Like I remember I love my accounting team, but like when they're like, hey, we need to meet about NetSuite implementation or something like that, I'm like, okay, sure, fine. And I'm like, I have no interest. I had no value in this meeting.
Why couldn't you just said no? Like, tell me what the best choice is for the company, our values and goals, and get it done.
I did that a bunch. And then there was like one time I was like, oh, I could tell they were like, they needed. But this is where the problem is, right? When you have humans who like great humans, if you have them in things that aren't as important because you haven't outsourced it or whatever, you are then having to go like spend time with those humans or be a jerk and not care about some of your employees, And so actually, I think over time, I hope we have employees where like we actually want to care about all the employees in our company because they are the ones that actually are driving the value. And we're not in this weird world where there's almost like two classes of employees, right? Like I saw a CEO recently runs a very well-known company. And he was saying how he was the founder of his company. He's CEO. He was a former engineer. And he's like, I don't really like talking to all the non-engineering people of the company. And so that's kind of, that sucks, because this guy like literally is like having to do something he doesn't even enjoy, but he loves the engineering people. Right. And so that's why I do believe between, outsourcing agents, all that stuff, hopefully we can make our company just the thing that really drives value.
Well, and this is, maybe you're a friend, right? Maybe it comes down to, hey, why don't you get rid of everyone who's not engineers and just be an engineering company and outsource all your sales?
That's a very extreme version of this. Totally.
Yeah. But that could actually work. That could work. The argument would be, and this actually want to go into hiring a little bit and going back to culture, hiring, because it's important. One of the things I think people overlook is the time cost of recruiting, hiring, and training people, and then managing that.
Totally.
Right. That is really high, especially for roles you don't know.
And then firing them and then rehiring them
right.
too.
You're going to get it wrong if it's an area you don't know well. You're getting it wrong anyways, but even more so if it's an area you don't know well.
Yeah.
So take it to its logical conclusion. Arguably, you should outsource everything that your utter core critical thing.
Yeah.
One thing to your friends saying like, great, hire a bunch of outsourced salespeople in sales companies. Tell them my goal is to get this many sales this quarter. And if you don't hit it, we're going to fire you and get it to a new vendor.
Mm-hmm.
But so how do you, is that the right mindset for a lot of founders? Like, because once again, people are really bad at saying no to these things.
Yeah.
Right. So many, especially early stage founders do this. And I tell them like, do you think Elon Musk gives a shit basically about what HR system?
No, I love that there's many things we don't agree on, but I love that he's unapologetically cares about engineering, and that's what he cares about. Yeah. So it's clear. It's really clear. Nobody would ever work at one of those companies and expect to have a meeting with them as an HR person, right? Like you couldn't imagine that. And so
why do other founders do that?
Yeah, I think one issue goes back to this thing we're talking about with advice. There is a thing which is like an investor has a small number of data points in their portfolio. They have like one data point that like seems sort of like this one. And they say, hey, that person hired a head of sales. You should too.
Yep.
Right. I saw that work there. Now, unfortunately, what we should remember is like, if we were talking about randomized control trials with like thousands of, entities, that's great. We're talking about VCs that might have like literally be involved in like 6 or 8 or 10 companies. And by the way, like 3 of them are like your company or 1 is like your company. And maybe they heard about another 2 because they read about it on X. And then they say
their companies, 2/3 of the company invested in are failing.
That's exactly the other thing. And so then they
come
in,
examples.
Right. And so then they come in and say, you should go do X. And then I think particularly younger founders, there's this desire to be like, well, they know what they're doing. I need to go do that. And I hope that, and I think you're seeing a lot more moxie and pushback from younger founders now than a while back. But I think that there's this element where it's like most of the advice doesn't apply.
Okay.
And so listen, take the feedback, etc. But I would not over rotate. That's one thing is like, just cause don't worry about what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to hire a head of sales, like supposed to do whatever, right? I would say what matters really for your business, And then the second thing is I'd say in your own head though, be careful. There's an extreme where you can be like, I'm just going to figure it all out myself, right? Which is a little bit what you're talking about. And so there, I think
penny wise and pound foolish is the way
you have to be really thoughtful and you have to be like, is this really reinvention of this thing? By me thinking you are really smart, you're going to think about this thing for 20 hours and design a new way to do performance reviews. Is that going to radically change the way the company works?
No. And are you supposed to be reinventing the wheel for performance reviews?
Right.
Is that, and if it is, then go build a company reinventing performance.
100%.
So don't just do it because you're being cheap.
Yeah.
Or how do you decide that one's going to get out of, I think so many founders and probably all of us to some extent sometimes are like penny wise and pound foolish. When do you decide it? Like if there are things or heuristics you use in your own head for deciding when I'm going to make X investment and then not making the other, right? An investment might be the right mind frame.
Yep.
Like, it's all an investment. And you have to decide where to invest. And it takes years to figure out if it's a good investment.
I think there's a couple things that In terms of when you think about investments, I think there's an investment type that I've thought a lot about, which is a little different than what we normally think of, which is money, right?
Yep.
And resources, all that. That's a very important investment. But a second kind of capital a company has is time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
more important.
That's a potentially more important. And a sub bullet within time is literally your time. And like, if you have a management team, if you're not just a really, really small company, your management team's time.
Yep.
And you control that 100%. Like, any CEO that says they're too busy or they're working too hard or whatever, I'm like, come on, you set all the rules. It's 100% you are choosing to do this. And so managing and being thoughtful about your time is, I think, so important at all stages. Now, that can show up in a couple different ways. One is, what level of recurring kind of thing do you want? Are you the kind of person that needs that weekly meeting with your leadership team? Do you need the one-on-ones? You have to be really thoughtful. Obviously, Jensen doesn't do the one-on-ones, other people do, but being really thoughtful about how you use the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you organize something, even if it's a small company, every minute that's not useful is you're wasting a minute for everyone. A minute times N people. Every minute, by the way, you're late for that meeting, you're wasting people's time.
Yeah.
Right? I think there should be like a meter, like almost like the old tax fees, of like measuring your time and your usage of time. And then I think one of the things I find very valuable is forcing functions.
Okay.
So, a lot of humans, things don't always happen till we have to have them. The
People
studying for the exam, right? And so I was listening to some, podcasts about OpenAI, and they're talking about like, I think it was Codex, but I forget what. It was one of the billion products they released. And they were talking about how they had their developer day come out and they had to get it done by them. Yeah. Right. And we've both been in that situation before. You have to get it done. Mm-hmm. And so what I would also think about is, how do you strategically use forcing functions for your team to get things done? So, and for you to get things done. So for example, if you're doing you're doing a YC demo day, and obviously that's a very clear forcing function, right? But what are all the things you want to be done by then? And listing them out and saying like, these are all going to be done. Maybe telling your investors publicly, signing up to it, right? But really using events to force action.
Did you as CEO create fake events?
Yeah.
Did you create?
100%. So some were real. So some was our conference, and it's like, hey, we have to launch this by this.
Right, we publicly told people are coming to town.
Totally. And so that was a little easier. And that was a little more straightforward. People got one thing that I think was really helpful, and this would not be useful if you're like a 10-person company, but probably even 50 or 100, is I would pick a topic that I thought wasn't going well. And for example, let's say it was like lead gen, or the way we're doing sales planning, or our AI strategy, whatever, pick whatever you want. And I would tell people maybe like a week in advance and be like, okay, on Wednesday, we're going to have a deep dive on this. You're going to come in and present this, what you're doing, what's the situation, what you're going to do about it. And by the way, I'm certainly not the one to invent this, but this idea of going really deep. And I would tell people, for example, let's say a marketing pipeline. I would say, look, I don't really want to see the dashboards. I don't care. I want to see like the metrics. I want to see the emails you sent. So the deep,
go deep in.
Go deep. Now, am I going to go deep on that every week? No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Part of this is simply force them to think about it, go deep once. By the way, sometimes you figure out, oh, that person's not the right person. And that's actually really effective too.
Yeah.
So I would encourage, like, if somebody's watching to and let's say you hired a head of sales or something and something's not going well, instead of just going like broad on everything, I would just go like super deep on one topic. Take me through, our first call deck. Let's listen to a bunch of calls together, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah. And that's a great example of things to do. Speaking of that, and then team, right? How do you hire? Right. You've been lucky to have great people like Allison Pickens on your team.
So great.
But like, how do you get people like that on your team and then keep them around, right? If you're getting great people, they're probably ambitious and everything else. How do you get those people on your team? What did that look like? How do you like to recruit? What did you do?
Yeah. So I think on recruiting, like probably a lot of us, you learn over the years, you evolve and things like that. Allison was our first kind of originally chief of staff, became like COO. She's incredible. Was so dear friend. And that was just like an investor sent a resume over, and I was like, oh my God, she has a great resume. Let's meet. And we didn't have a job, but she was just super smart. And so I think the pattern there is like early on, having a job to me is not the most important thing. Yeah. If you get a really smart person who seems like just the right person,
just find a way
to get them in. Yep. Right. I think that as long as you can afford them or whatever, I think it's like really valuable, particularly those like people that are willing to do anything. Some people, and by the way, it doesn't matter how experienced or whatever, just the willingness to do whatever. Allison worked on vertical strategy, built our SDR team, ran our customer success team, became CEO, did M&A, right? Just
Like, she just did all of it.
She's just amazing, right? And so I think that's early on being very open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
A second thing I think is being, when you get somebody, remembering it's sales. And this is, I think, where people, all of us, including me, we forget, like, we're like, well, I'm interviewing them. It's like, no, you're also selling them if they're good.
Yep.
Right. And so there was a lot of things where, you know, the one that was kind of famous in Gainsight lore was like, we've done all these silly music videos over the years, which I'm certainly responsible for. And there was one where I love music. I have no talent except writing, but I love music. And so there's one where there was this sales rep, and we're trying to get him. And I think it was competitive. Like, he had some other offers, but he was into, like, in the interview, he admitted he was into rap, or did some like rap dancing kind of thing when he was a kid. And he grew up in like Utah. So super just kind of like cute, like, and, so I made like a little rap video, for him that was really bad. But just like me,
but you probably thought it was hilarious. Like,
he did. Cool. He showed it to his wife. Like, he was like, that's why I came in.
Yeah.
Right. And so remember that it's sales. And I can tell, like, a lot of founders don't approach it that way, especially if you have a hot company. You sometimes miss that, but the great ones do. You know, I was listening to something, I think it was a Cursor people or somebody, where they're like, they just fly like around the world. And
like, Cursor, there's an article about Cursor recently doing.
Yeah, they're insane.
They go hardcore.
They're so good. It's sales, and it's like, don't, sell to the right people. So don't get the wrong person in there. But then once you got the right person, you got to sell them. And then on your point about, kind of ongoing, you got to keep selling.
Yeah.
And so I think that is remembering that really talented people want to keep growing and evolving. That doesn't mean necessarily more titles or whatever, right? But it means, like, maybe being willing to give them stuff that they don't have experience in.
Yep.
I found that the hardest thing there was the other executives who are very experienced. And they're like, how can you put so-and-so into this job? They've never done it before. And then I'm like, wow. So the people that did it before didn't do a very good job. So.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a lot. Like, let's get someone new here, fresh eyes, and give it a shot. Talk more about sales, right? How did you get good at sales as a founder?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It's so interesting because it's so similar. I'll tell you a couple of stories. Like, one story was, we were very early, like that same little crappy office I was describing before. Yep. And,
2 bathrooms.
2 bathrooms, right? We probably had, like, at this point, maybe $500,000 of ARR, something like that. And there weren't that many SaaS companies. So, like, to get a SaaS company as a customer was a big deal. And to lose one was really bad, right? Because there weren't that many. And so we heard about this company, and it was a company called Blackbaud, which is like nonprofit software. It's decent. And now it's about, I don't know, 800 million revenue company. And then it was, let's say, a few hundred million, right? And we heard that through the grapevine that they were looking at, like, customer success technology. And they weren't even looking at us. And they were about to go with somebody else. I don't remember how.
Like, oh my God, how did they not hear? You mean, your marketing team, how did they not hear?
Totally. No, we were tiny companies. So, like, that part of it was understood. But so then I went on LinkedIn. I figured out that my assistant at the time knew somebody who knew the guy who was the decision maker. Okay. So I first cold emailed the decision maker. Then I had my assistant go through that.
Brand. She
She eventually got, like, just through that, relationship, got at least, like, the guy to respond to the email. And of course, what I tell him is, like, a Monday, I was like, oh, hey, Kevin, how's it going? I think his name's Kevin. It turns out, by the way, I'm going to be in your neck of the woods on Thursday. I'd love to meet. And he's like, sure, I'd love to see you. Now, his neck of the woods is Charleston, South Carolina. I, of course, had absolutely no plans to be in Charleston, South Carolina later that week. But by the way, you can't get there in a nonstop flight. It's a lovely, lovely place. But I was like, okay. And I just went there. And I took the red eye.
Yep.
Yeah, came right off the plane, went to the office.
Yep.
And then they're a customer still 13 years later.
Wow.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, absolutely.
So that was a huge ROI.
Absolutely crazy. And it's like, I mean, price, I don't know, $1 million, $500,000 with us a year, right? I mean, so the lifetime revenue from that plane flight is millions and millions of dollars.
So what's the key takeaway then from the story like that? Is it, as a founder, you just need to be willing to do anything to get the sale? Or is it like, how do you get that mindset?
Well, the sale is the part. Obviously, I have to care about the rest of it because I am who I am, right? But yeah, it's about, like, commitment goes a long way.
Yeah,
software
showing up.
Software showing up. Software is very undifferentiated, largely, and therefore the thing is who shows up. It sends a signal that they're going to show up for you later. By the way, later on, then you have to show up too. right? Post sale. I'll give you an example of that. We had another kind of fun story. So we had this customer early on. It was Splunk. Splunk,
of course.
and they were still Splunk's part of Cisco now, but they were still kind of a public company, independent. And there was this kind of like early, like, a lot of your early customers and companies will often be these like innovative, like pioneering, but like mid-level people. So that's the person who bought our software there. Maybe they spent $200,000 with us or something, which that on its own is a lot of money for us. And it's probably like 2014 or so, 2015 maybe. And so then we find out that there's a new boss of a chief customer officer. That boss didn't come out of SaaS. And I got his LinkedIn profile, looked him up. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anyone that knows him, right? I'm screwed. What do I do?
He's going to go bring his own company.
And literally, he worked at a company who was a huge Salesforce shop, and Salesforce is a big partner of Gainsight, but like you can kind of custom build anything on Salesforce. So what our context said is, the new guy, he's going to have it custom built in Salesforce.
Yeah, of course.
So I do the same thing.
Only rolling my eyes next. There's a different story about bringing in senior executives who just want to put on some.
Totally. Now this guy's amazing. So we're actually friends out because the story ends well. I cold email him, and I might have gone a couple different ways. Same thing. Like I'm probably spamming this guy a bunch of times. Okay. We get on a call, and it was one of these calls where you could tell like he's doing it because he's a really nice guy, but like he's busy. Why is he even taking this call? He's going to turn this vendor, some random company he's never heard of. But we chit chat at the beginning, and I find out like he's into sports. Sports cars. Whatever fancy cars. And so I had an assistant at the time. I had her like buy on Amazon, like a toy sports car and send it to her. That toy sports car may literally have been associated with a few million in revenue because that he kind of was like, oh, wow, this guy listens and cares. And then he dug in, and then we did like a deep dive meeting, and then he was like, "Oh wow, these guys."
Right, he's willing at least to give you next shot.
Give us the next shot. We said know what they're doing. Oh, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Then he joined then they did a big 3-year renewal for like $2 million a year. Then he joined our advisory board, and now we're still friends. Like he's running a different company now.
That's amazing.
And so I just think commitment, which sounds so cliche, it's pretty rare. The opposite of commitment, by the way, is transactionality.
Yeah.
The opposite of commitment is, hey, if you can't do something for now, forget you. Right. Opposite commitment's not responding to somebody's email if they can't help you. You can't, right, which likely happens a lot.
Yeah.
And so because so many people are transactional, commitment stands out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is there something you did to teach yourself to get good at just overall sales stuff? Going through thinking through the end of things, right? So you're like, okay, you've grown Gainsight into this successful big company, making everything else, like you've changed probably your style in some ways a lot, maybe not a lot. What ended up getting you to the point where it's time to go, it's time to do something different? And where does that lead to where you are today?
Yeah, totally. 3 things on time to go. One is that that's such an amazing experience in Gainsight, right? But you eventually do it for a while, and you feel like almost all the things we've talked about, the founder mode, putting your heart into it, et cetera. If you're not feeling that anymore, I think it's a responsibility to make sure the person that's running it is feeling it.
Yeah.
And part of what gave me confidence was I had hired such an amazing president, this guy, Chuck Gunapathy. And so I knew my baby would not just be in good hands, be in, I think, better hands for the next phase. So he's doing awesome. Number 2 is what's fun is I've dealt with some personal stuff outside where we're kids, mental health stuff, things like that. And so I just wanted to go focus on that.
Yeah.
And then number 3 is I knew that we'll probably talk about this in a bit. The other side, like the opportunities out there, just such an exciting time. And so I do think that that's kind of a, unusual thing to say, because I know the adage is always keep going forever. I'm like, keep going as long as your heart's still in it.
Yeah.
And then when it's not, then it's okay to hand it off. Eventually everything gets handed off or sold or shut down or whatever. 100%. Right. So,
and you guys sold in 2020.
Sold in 2020. And I thought, by the way, sold at the very end of 2020. So for all intents and purposes, 2021. Yeah. And, I thought I would stay a couple years. Vista was amazing. They're so awesome. This is the private equity firm that bought us. And I learned so much about
they have a system in place.
So, there's exactly. And we got so much more profitable and grew so much. And I thought I would learn so much. I did. But of course it was 2021. We thought, oh yeah, we'll do this for a couple years and we'll sell it because it would have another exit.
Yep.
And go public, whatever.
He does.
And but of course, the market had other ideas, right? Because multiples went down, markets slowed down, whatever, and so it just meant it's going to be a longer slog.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so great. You're thinking time to do something different. Think through like one, how do you think through like work-life unity?
Yeah.
It's like, just like, what does that mean for you? How did you deal with that while you're running Gainsight? Of course, now it's a different story, but like, how did you deal with that, right? When you say like, you're passionate, you're thinking about this all the time, probably waking up in the middle of the night, worried about some customer problem. How do you deal with all the other life things?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing. I like the word unity, so I'm glad you said that versus balance. So because I'm very lucky to love what I do, so I never felt like work and life, but it is more of a calendar-ish, right? You've got if you have kids or you have some other part of your life, parents, partners, friends, and it's just like, when can I do all of the things? Yeah. Now the great thing is like, if you're a CEO, a founder, whatever, you have control. So you're the one who decides everything, right? So everyone knew like, okay, Nick's gonna, drop his kids to school, or Nick's going to go to this thing, or Nick never misses Halloween with his kids or whatever. And that's just what it is.
Yep.
So nobody's scheduling meetings then. And I feel for people obviously further down the ranks, but like we try to empower that for everyone. We try to say, look, I always said, I'd love it if you never miss your kids' stuff or your family stuff or whatever, and anything you care about, right? And so I think there's some element where the more you empower it, the more you feel less guilty. I think you do feel guilty as a CEO or founder if you are the only one having that work-life unity. Yeah. But one thing you might consider is, if you care about it for yourself, maybe you just have everyone have a little bit.
Right. You create that culture. You say like, we trust you we try to do this at Chore. We say we trust you as a professional. Like, get your stuff done. Schedule your life the way you need to, but get it done. Like, you have to delight your clients. It's one of our cults.
Exactly.
But okay, just tell your client like, you got to take your kid to the doctor.
That's it.
Great.
Exactly. Everyone at Gainsight, I think that's something that is still to this day people really value, is you just really can have your life.
Yeah, which is amazing too. If there's a single piece of advice that you would give to your 25-year-old self, what would that be?
I think that one thing that is for people that have doubt, and the mix of like weird, like exterior, speaking, passion, all that stuff I have, but also the internal shyness and doubt and all that. Remembering sometimes the things that you think of as flaws, also about yourself, can also be strengths. Not that they don't have challenges associated with them, right? The shyness, the introspection, all those things can also create creativity and passion and love and all those types of things, right?
What is your advice around like getting a mentor, coach, those sorts of things?
Huge fan of like having something.
Yeah.
I think the value of a coach is high. Obviously you have to afford it. You have to get the right one. But I think somebody who can just kind of like work with you on a regular basis and get to know you really well, especially somebody who gets to know you as a human, not just as a business person. Mm-hmm. So obviously you can get a coach who tells you how to set up a management dashboard, or, how to recruit a VP of sales. That's great. But somebody who can just be like, look, what do you want out of your life and your work? Think kind of the kinds of things you've asked me. I'm a big believer. I also think there's a different value, and maybe you do one or the other, or do both, of the peer stuff, right? So been fortunate. I was in something called YPO. It's like a CEO group for a long time. And I just learned so much. I care so much about the people.
And you left it? You're not in YPO anymore?
Yeah, you actually can't. Well, it's funny. I technically could still be in it. I left it because of some of the personal stuff I'm dealing with, but I'm starting to get to the edge of the Y, because I'm 48. And once you get to 50, you're actually out. So no more Y.
Yep. Okay. And then in mentors, as well, it sounds like it's good to have if you can get them.
I like mentors. I never actually had the one person who's like, I have one mentor.
Yeah.
I actually think, like, for me, my mentors are like every podcast I listen to, every person I meet, like learning from you today, like that's my mentorship. That's
a great way of putting it. I actually am making me feel better too, by the way, because I feel like I don't have that many direct mentors. And I actually really regret that sometimes, that I haven't like kept up with people who are doing those things, or like could be a mentor. But, and you've heard this from a lot of people, if you read lots of books about entrepreneurs, like it's on the Entrepreneurial podcast, whatever it is, like you can learn from these mentors who've done it before without having to actually like talk with them.
100%. Oh, one other thing, by the way, another thing, which I know it's so cheesy, but mentors, a legit huge coach and mentor for me is some combo of ChatGPT and Claude. Like I talk to all the time about personal stuff, work stuff. It actually is really helpful.
How do you choose which one to talk to you? And then
it's funny. I've always been a ChatGPT person, and now I just started using Claude a little more. I'm like, I kind of like it. And I feel like I'm cheating on ChatGPT now. So,
and ChatGPT probably feels that way too.
It does.
Do you verbal talk with it? And just like,
I do verbal on ChatGPT. It's very annoying because it's still like, it drops a lot, like it skips a lot and stuff. So it's very frustrating. And then I do audio, I do text, and then the Quad app is not as good for voice, so I just do text.
And you're just asking a question about what I should do here. How do I think through this?
Yeah, I mean, literally everything from personal stuff, like what should I do with the situation, to like, how should I think about my next career? What do I do board wise? All that stuff. Yeah.
So the last few questions, in one is speaking of career. What is next for Nick? Like,
I am figuring that out, and that's actually kind of a fun phase to be in, to not know. Very lucky to be like,
okay. You have the pick of anything, probably.
Yeah, like pick of stuff, but also like lucky that there's not a forcing function. I know a lot of people don't have that. They have like time, they got to get a job and stuff. So for me, it's more, I figured out what I want in this next phase is to learn a lot. And it's like one of the most exciting times. It's like the nerd's paradise right now, right? Like everything that's happening is crazy. And so I just kind of like, I'm going to conferences, talking to VCs, and just learning. And I have no idea where that'll end up, of like some mix of starting something, operating something, I have no idea.
Not that you're asking me for advice, but something I've heard from people is some people are just like vibe coding something new every day on a regular basis to test out their ability to like build.
I've heard. I'm thinking about actually, because that's one of the things I was doing was, setting up Cloud Code, dusting off some of my coding capabilities, and then, which I started doing. So yeah, I was thinking about doing that.
Exactly. So last single question, if there's a single piece of advice that you could give to every entrepreneur for excellence, how do you boil all this conversation down into a single piece of advice for someone to be an excellent entrepreneur?
I don't think there's anything more powerful, in my opinion, than understanding yourself. Now, that could be you are just a killer and that's what you care about. That could be the level of that understanding. And it could be like your childhood or whatever. But I think that like to the point when you get to a point where like you are who you think you are, who you say you are, who you tell investors you are and employees, I think that's where you can operate at the highest level of skill.
Yeah. Nick, how can people find you if they want to get in touch, learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm just usually at my daughter's high school, but so you can come by. But otherwise,
you'll be sitting in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Sit in the corner, exactly. I check LinkedIn, obviously, so I'd love to.
Amazing, Nick. Thank you so much for the time. As we talked about, time is really precious. So thank you for spending some of it with me and my audience. I appreciate it.
Awesome being here.